previous workshops went just a few minutes long. I'm Dan McElroy. Good morning. I am Executive Vice President of the Resort and Campground Association, have been for almost 5 years. This is my 5th fall conference. I want to make very clear, I am not a lawyer. I never went to law school. So I can't give you legal advice. I can, however, tell you what we know the law to be, tell you where you can get more information. If there's a state agency involved, what information they may have. One of the things that we've done for about the last 3 or 4 years is keep a log of all the questions the members of all 3 associations in the coalition asked and what the answer was or where we found the answer. I probably have 300 or so questions that have been asked, and so I look back at the most frequently asked questions and use those for this presentation. It also hopes I have 2 goals. One is so I don't have to research every question every time. And secondly, so I give the same answer to everyone who asks a question every time, at least as long as I believe it to be correct. The number 1 questions we get, and you'll hear it as I go through some of these things, are about laws regarding our employees. Payroll, HR, discipline, what do I do with an overpayment? How do I handle a bad performer? How do I appeal a UI claim? More than half of our calls are about HR related issues. The second biggest cluster of issues is about sales tax. Who do I charge? What do I charge? When can I not charge? What do I have to tell people? The state relies on 4 kinds of taxes: income tax, sales and excise tax, property tax, and then taxes on special products like alcohol and tobacco. You wouldn't think it, but the most complicated system, bar none, is sales tax. And so we can talk about sales tax questions, but it is another big source of questions. Liquor is our 3rd largest category, and then general miscellaneous doesn't fit anywhere else questions. I have quite a bit prepared of questions that have come in the last year, but they're not as important or interesting as questions you may have about issues that have taken place in your business or questions you have about what's happened in the law. I'm going to start with 4 changes that happened at the legislature this last year. This was the least, this legislative session passed fewer laws than any legislature in state history. That was my reaction. We passed 77 laws. You had to go back to the territorial session of 1857 to find a legislative session with that few laws. That's a really good thing. They came back in special session and passed 5 more laws. So they had a total of 82 for the year. That's the 2nd lowest number after the territorial session. So not a huge amount changed. The 4 things that changed, 5 things that changed that may affect your business, 4 of them were in the area of outdoor issues, natural resources, those kinds of things. One that we talked about extensively in a workshop yesterday, I can get in it if you're interested, but was a change in a pollution control agency rule about septic regulation for larger campgrounds and resorts. In 2011, the PCA changed a rule that they calculate the amount of flow in a system as to whether or not it triggers a fairly expensive state federal license called a subterranean discharge system, or SDS license. We don't want our members to trigger that because it's really expensive. The application fee is $9,400. You have to hire a professional engineer and build monitoring wells. It's $100,000 to $500,000 challenge if you have to go through it. So we're working really hard to keep that away. We did pass a law that sort of circumvents a 2011 rule change just for resorts and campgrounds that are open 180 days or less. And we're working on some changes this year for resorts and campgrounds open more than that. I think we've got an agreement with the PCA. Those of you who are on city sewer, this doesn't apply to you. Only applies to those of you who are on septic systems. The short definition, there's a lot more information that I can provide or that I can point you to the website, is that those of you who have 100 campsites or 25 cabins or more should be measuring the amount of water your system pumps or the amount of sewage you're creating through a system of water meters or lift station meters or water softener if you soften your water, or sewage flow meters, which are more complicated. The low-cost way is by metering water. The PCA is now moving toward actual measured flow rather than a table to calculate whether you trigger this expensive SDS permit. I'm going to stop there. Are there those of you for whom this is a big issue, or you have other questions about SDS?
Yeah, I mean, I think for most of us, yeah, it's a big issue. You kind of just sit here and don't know how to, I measure my flow out. I'm going to put measures in for my, my water flow out.
Yes.
Meters and water flow out, and when I put meters in for the septic pump out. I'd like to expand, but at this point, I'm at 150 sites now. I'm kind of in between. I'd like to put another 50 or 100 in, and without doing the SDS, I don't know where to go. I guess I just.
And you're headed in the right direction by metering. The law says if you have a maximum daily flow during a 7-day peak period, so it's the average of a 7-day busy period. We agreed with the PCA it'll be the 2-week period around the 4th of July, because we believe for all of our members. Now we may have some resorts like Lutzen that are heavier in the winter, and we're working on that. They happen to, they're not on sewer yet, but they probably are headed that way. So you're doing the right things. Keep your log book. The new kind of detailed rule is expected to be published in next month's state register. I'll have it in the update. I have a copy, and so if you ask me or put send septic rule on a business card and hand it to me, I'll email you the exact rule. Okay. It isn't perfect. There's some problems with campgrounds particularly that may have multiple systems. They have 5, 6, 7, 8 systems. PCA is still going to insist on calling that a single system if they're within a half mile of each other and they're controlled by a single person or entity. We're working with a group called the Minnesota On-Site Wastewater Association, MAWA, to fix that. But measured flow will help you a lot.
Okay.
All right. Second thing that changed has to do with bunkhouses and camper cabins. Came to us from our outfitter members who were getting hit by the Department of Health lodging inspectors saying these bunkhouses weren't big enough for the number of beds they had in. Some of you may have small cabins. I know Maryland has for little studios. The challenge has been that the Minnesota lodging rules haven't been looked at since 1955. I'm sorry, they haven't been amended significantly since 55. They were looked at in the early 90s. We're working with the Minnesota Department of Health, Food, Pools, and Lodging Division. I have to be careful. I said in a public meeting, food, pools, and lodging, and I got in terrible trouble. To amend that, but in kind of an interim step, we passed a law that exempts bunkhouses and camper cabins from the square footage requirement. Now, what's the definition of a bunkhouse and a camper cabin? Bunkhouses are intended for stays of 3 days or less, often in conjunction with canoe trips, horseback riding trips, hiking trips. You know, they are the kinds of things outfitters have for groups leaving on or coming back from a trip. Camper cabins, we took the definition from the Department of Natural Resources. The DNR was out of compliance with Department of Health rules until this changed. Now, they didn't do anything about it because it's the government. But there was a gray area as to whether our members could build camper cabins or not. Not all of our members will want to. They are sort of like wooden tents. The definition of a camper cabin is a permanent rustic enclosure with walls and a floor that does not include a camper or bath, a kitchen or bath, and is located in a state park administered by the Commissioner of Natural Resources, or at a resort is defined under Minnesota statute, or at a recreational camping area is defined under Minnesota statute. And it's intended to be a place where sleeping accommodations are furnished to the public. You can now do those if you want to. There's no reason that you have to. The challenge is what they will rent for. The DNR has 98 camper cabins currently. They have 2 more in the pipeline, so they'll have 100 spread kind of across the state. They rent from $50 to $70 a night. They try to get them, the nicest ones are at Wild River State Park, and they're quite winterized. They use them for cross-country skiing and snowshoeing. The newer ones are quite basic. They have an electric light. Some of them have an electric heater, many do not. 4 bunks and a table. They are 72 square feet, I believe, or 82 square feet. They're 6 by 12, 8 by 12, roughly. They're very small. You can build them much cheaper than the DNR can, because the DNR has to go through architects and engineers and site surveys and grading plans and all sorts of stuff you wouldn't do on your own property. They claim they cost them $70,000 a piece. My members think they can build them for $10,000 or $12,000. They are essentially wooden tents. Yes.
No, I'd build them for that.
Yeah, I think so.
That's what the build there is. They built about 8 of them for like, they're 15%.
Okay.
Piece they built them for uncovered.
And did they put them on slabs?
Yes.
Okay, so that's, they don't have to have a slab. They could have a wooden floor, or they could have no floor. Now, if you are in a county that enforces the state building code, talk to me, because they shouldn't be prohibited by the building code, but we may have to do some building inspector education. Yes?
They are to a degree, because we've got 2 camper cabins at our campground. And when the county inspector came out this year, he said, I have to make both of those camper cabins and our chalet egress accessible. And I said, well, I understand egress is 5.71 square feet. And he said, yes, but the window on the back, it's kind of an awning window, so you got the middle bar in there. He said, they can't get out. I said, okay, so it's 8 feet by 14 feet. And I said, what's egress? 5.71 square feet, right? And he says, yep. I said, you got your calculator? He says, yep. And I said, okay, take 36 times 82. Divide that out, how many square feet do we have? He says, we got 7.3. I said, then I meet it. He says, no, you don't. I said, I got the door right here. The entry door is 3 foot by 8 foot, not 7 or 6 foot 8.
Yeah.
So I said, I don't need to change those windows out. And he said, I'll have to get back to you on that.
Yeah, I think you're right. If you'd let me know what you hear about that, that would be helpful.
Okay.
Some of the DNR ones don't even have doors. You know, they're kind of open in the front, and some of them have their heaters outside. So there's lots of flexibility. But the one thing, we did not get an exemption from building code issues. We did get an exemption from the food, pool, and lodging minimum square footage, which is 60 square foot per bed, which is obsolete probably.
And I even asked him, I said, well, are we grandfathered into the new building code? He says, yeah, but he went back and pulled up the building code prior to 1972. Which I don't know if these cabins, if they did it back then or not, so.